I could have the most attractive wife in the world and the most money in my bank account, and I would never be happy because I was conditioned to always wanting more, to always wanting something else. And so it was a very real, that was that connection between happiness and porn, as I realized this is leading me to never be happy if I keep going down this path. I'll always be wandering, looking for something more and never being able to satisfy my craving. Welcome back to Unhooked. Today, I'm sharing a conversation I had on my friend Jake Kastleman's podcast, No More Desire. Jake does incredible work helping men quit porn, and he was kind enough to let me re-share this episode here on Unhooked. In this conversation, we dive deep into shame and its role in addiction, talk about the difference between toxic shame that keeps you stuck and healthy pro-social shame that actually protects your values. We get into the Buddhist metaphor of the realm of the hungry ghosts as a way of understanding cravings, why porn is more of a symptom than the real problem, and how mindfulness, equanimity, and genuine connection help you step out of that endless hunger for more. So if you've ever felt like you're stuck in the same patterns or you beat yourself up for not being further along, this one is for you. Big thank you to Jake for having me on his podcast and letting me bring this conversation to you here. All right, let's get into the interview.
Jeremy, welcome, man. It's awesome to have you here. So it's fitting that you're living in Thailand because you do have this unique background from studying genetics at Duke University to becoming a Buddhist monk and now leading the Unhooked Academy, working with men who struggle with pornography and sex addiction. So what I'd love to know more about that background and if you can tell people just what that was like, what your journey's been like, and what brought you here.
Yeah, I've always had a passion for the sciences, for research, and I was on track. I was working my way up, working on my PhD at Duke and looking to become a research professor. So I always just loved the sciences and particularly studying things like biology and genetics and evolution. Um, and at some point, in the middle of my life, I started to realize that I was actually addicted to porn. I started noticing that around the end of undergrad. I started recognizing some of the issues with that in my life. And that sent me down this rabbit hole of getting into the topic of, what happiness is and what's going on in my mind and how to actually have deeper happiness and fulfillment in my life. So that sent me down this rabbit hole of looking into some of these topics, these deeper questions. And that got me into Buddhist philosophy, and ended up traveling to India and started going on these meditation retreats. And, I could go down any of these rabbit holes that you like, but it really became a big part of my life. And so much so that I ended up leaving my career as an academic and committed my life fully to teaching meditation. And so I did that for a few years, teaching meditation full time. And eventually, what was going on is I was leading these retreats in Thailand, these silent meditation retreats, and people were coming on the retreats. And more people were coming and wanting to work with me one-on-one and wanting to get kind of support in their life. And I started recognizing that a lot of people, particularly the men who were coming to me, a lot of them were struggling with porn addiction, and kind of came full circle because it was something that I had struggled with. I knew it very well. And it was what got me into meditation. So I started doing more and more work in this topic of helping guys with porn addiction and recovery and just teaching them what I had done in order to break free. And eventually I just realized that this is a huge issue around the world and I could make a big difference if I just focused entirely on this. So that's when around 2018, I started focusing specifically on porn addiction as my main thing.
I think that there's a lot behind that story of you actually choosing to leave your career in academia and go out to commit yourself to this life into teaching meditation and, to become a Buddhist monk. What was it like making that decision?
Yeah, interesting. It really wasn't a difficult decision for me to leave my PhD. It kind of sounds like it was. I was even 4.5 years into my PhD program, so I was pretty far along in my PhD. Uh, but when I made the decision to leave, it was actually such a simple decision because what happened is by the time I got to grad school, I had already started my own journey with meditation. So I had already discovered it, and it had really changed my life. And so when I got to grad school, I started teaching meditation just for fun. I just started offering kind of a morning meditation on campus for anyone who was interested, mostly as a way just to keep myself accountable, to make sure that I
Right.
was actually doing the meditation.
Yeah.
And I was doing that for about 4 years, while I was also doing my graduate research. And I just realized how much more passionate I was about teaching people about understanding their mind, really understanding how to practice mindfulness and meditation in a way that was very secular and non-religious. Because that was important to me. I'd always kind of avoided Buddhism because I thought it was just a religion I had to get into. But when I realized that mindfulness wasn't a religious thing, it was really just a way of understanding your mind and training your mind, and it could be very secular. That's when it really opened up to me. And so I started teaching other people how to meditate in this very secular way. And I just realized I was way more passionate about teaching people about understanding their mind and understanding what leads to happiness. And I was less interested in the research I was doing. And so at some point, I just realized my life, I'd be so much more fulfilled in my life if this is what I was doing for a living. And so I left and, haven't really had any regrets this entire time since leaving. The only regret, it would be nice to have that PhD at the end of my name, but, it wasn't worth it for me to stick around because I didn't want to do science after that. I wanted to just teach people about their minds and understanding suffering and understanding happiness.
It's very cool. It's kind of that moment of singularity, perhaps, where something just
Mm.
intuitively makes sense. It's like, this is where I'm at. And so pursuing that new life. So, can you talk more about that kind of turning point that led you to leave the world of science and step into the world of mindfulness and recovery work, and what that you're working with these men that you see are struggling with pornography addiction, and they're coming to you for meditation, right? You keep seeing over and over again, porn addiction, porn addiction. Did you make the connection at that point in your own recovery and for these individuals of the connection between kind of happiness and the mind and how people were prone towards pornography addiction? Did that begin to
Mhm.
coalesce over time? Was it clear in the beginning? What was that like?
Yeah, it was interesting. It was very clear from the beginning the connection between porn addiction recovery and mindfulness and kind of meditation and happiness. The reason it was clear from the beginning, and when I say the beginning, I mean, years before I even started working with anyone, it was clear. And the reason it was clear is because it was my origin. What really the turning point in my life was when I really saw the connection between my porn usage and my happiness. And I started to see that mindfulness and meditation was the way that I could, start to climb out of the darkness that I had gotten myself into. So for me, it was this totally life changing experience when I recognized my addiction to porn and realized that I had been hardwiring in suffering and dissatisfaction. Understanding neuroplasticity was a big part of my own recovery. And I recovered before I even knew recovery was a thing. I didn't know about 12-step groups or recovery circles or the world of addiction. I just saw that I had this habit, this compulsive habit and behavior that was causing a lot of havoc in my life. And I started to recognize, wow, this is causing a lot of suffering and I need to find a way out of this. And so for me, my recovery was through meditation. It wasn't through traditional recovery. So for me, it was a very clear thing of understanding, yeah, porn addiction leads to suffering, to lying, to deceit, to unhappiness. And mindfulness is simply a tool you can use to break free from that addiction.
Can you talk more about, from the secular perspective, why pornography addiction, or maybe pornography in general, I'd love to hear that from you, causes unhappiness?
Yeah, and it's something I know that you wanted to talk about, like, kind of interesting that from this secular perspective, like, I'm not coming at this from a religious perspective. It's not kind of a moralistic, porn is evil kind of thing. I mean, porn, the porn industry can definitely be evil, but
Mm, mhm,
for me personally, I have nothing philosophically against watching other people have sex. But, in terms of the ramifications of that action on your life and on your relationships and on your well being, there are so many ways that it causes harm to yourself and to others. And so for me in my life, the main thing that I started noticing was just how much it was ruining my ability to be satisfied in my relationships. It was ruining my ability to find joy or pleasure or satisfaction in anything outside
mhm,
of relationships and
yeah,
and sex. And it's because of the ways that porn, again, hardwires your brain to be searching for something novel, something new, hardwires you to be looking for something better just around the corner rather than cultivating contentment or appreciation for what you already have. So that was
yeah.
one of the big ways, just, the ways in my life that I noticed it was is really impacting my ability to be content, to have gratitude, to appreciate what I already had. And I realized that if I kept living my life that way, it didn't matter how much I acquired or, all the, I could have the most attractive wife in the world and the most money in my bank account, and I would never be happy because I was conditioned to always wanting more, to always wanting something else. And so it was a very real, that was that connection between happiness and porn as I realized this is leading me to never be happy if I keep going down this path. I'll always be wandering, looking for something more, and never being able to satisfy my craving.
'Cause in some ways, it really comes back to just these principles that we've been taught for a long, long time. I mean, when we go to Buddhism, right, the Buddha taught about craving. Was one of his main
Hmm.
teachings, and where craving leads to suffering and unhappiness. And so anything that I indulge in profusely, or I'm craving, is going to cause unhappiness, right? I mean, would you see pornography as just yet another form of that, or how do you see it?
Yeah. And I think that it also brings up a good point that it's not just pornography. It's like it's anything that we crave and we have this lustful desire after of I need to have this thing. That's what causes suffering. So porn is one particular outlet. But men also struggle with, all kinds of other forms of craving, just seeking validation from women who are not our partner,
Mhm,
seeking more money, seeking more success and craving it. And there's also an important distinction between desire or aspiration and craving. You can have healthy desires to say, yeah, I do desire to have an amazing relationship. I do desire to have financial security so I can support my family. I do have these aspirations of having a beautiful home and a peaceful life. It's the craving that says, I need to have this thing and I need it now. And if I don't get it, then I can't be happy. It's this kind of tunnel vision, hyper focused, graspy feeling. That's what craving is. And there is a big difference between craving and desire. A lot of people, there's a big misconception that, oh, Buddhism is about having no desires and you just have to become kind of a puddle, like a lump of clay that sits there and doesn't do anything. And it's not true. It's like you can have, desires for fitness in the gym and financial goals and, all kinds of things. But it's that craving that says, I need to have this and I'll do anything. I'll lie and cheat and steal in order to get it. That's where it causes suffering.
And what do you feel like makes the difference between me having a desire for things that kind of bring me enjoyment or satisfaction versus I'm craving this? What makes that separation?
Yeah, I mean, and it really is down to kind of what's the flavor of the mind, really understanding what's the intention behind the desire. And that's where mindfulness is such an important tool, is learning how to observe what's actually going on inside your mind. Learning how to observe what's my intention behind this. Do I have
Mhm.
this desire because I'm trying to fill some void, or I'm trying to run away from some pain of loneliness or fear or insecurity? Or do I have this desire for wholesome reasons? Because I want to support my family, because I want to be of service in the world and, of service in my community. So really understanding, it's interesting. The Buddha had this quote. He said, everything rests on the tip of intention. And what it means is like looking at your intention behind your actions and behind your desires is really important. You can have the same outward action, but the intention behind it actually makes a big difference. If your intention behind it is to just be greedy and, fill some void and run away from your emotions, it's going to have a very different outcome than if you're doing something because your intention is to make the world a better place.
Yep.
And that takes awareness, starting with awareness.
Yep. There's so much more that we could talk about on that. That's for sure. Um, how did your experience, Jeremy, as a monk, spending so much time in silence, self observation, shape your understanding of human suffering and of addiction? And if you could kind of tell people how long you spent doing that, I think it was a few years practicing as a monk, or am I totally off?
No, so yeah, a little bit off. So when I first started getting into Buddhism, I traveled to India and had these really incredible insights into my own life. And a big part of that was going on these things called silent meditation retreats. Sometimes they're called Vipassana retreats. In the West, we call them insight meditation retreats. But essentially, it's you go off to a retreat center, and for somewhere around 10 days, sometimes they're a little shorter, sometimes a little longer. But imagine 10 days of no talking, no reading, no writing, no journaling, no electronics, no internet or email. So you're removing all your distractions and you're really just practicing mindfulness 24/7 for the entire time that you're not talking to the other participants. You're not even supposed to make eye contact with the other participants. You're really just in your own space, being in your body and in your present moment. So when you're doing a sitting meditation, you're practicing the meditation. When you're doing the walking meditation, you're walking. When you're eating, you're really being mindful about reaching for your utensil and putting the food in your mouth and tasting the food. So you're present 24/7. And it is, as you can imagine, incredibly difficult. And it is not a fun experience. It's not like, oh, this is so happy and oh, what a relaxing vacation. It's not like sitting on a beach drinking a margarita. It's hard work because you have nothing to distract you from your own mind and from your own craziness. You realize just how crazy the mind is when you do these things.
I was
But
I was I was going to
those,
say I
yeah,
feel like one part of me is definitely like, I feel like I'd lose my mind. I'd go crazy trying to do that. And then another part was like, well, I don't know, maybe it'd be kind of nice. And I feel like in reality it would be incredibly challenging and just agony in some ways.
yeah. Well, it's so funny. It's people say this. I would go crazy if I did that, and the hilarity behind it is that what's real is that you're already crazy. And when you go on a retreat, you just finally have an opportunity to see how crazy you are because you're
Yeah.
not distracting yourself.
Yep.
And that's the point of it is it's like you remove all the distractions so you actually can see the way your mind is functioning already on a regular basis. You can see the way you get hooked by these things. You can see the way you start to fantasize about things you don't have, or, oh, I want this. I want to, if only I had a better cushion to sit on, or if only I had this sexual encounter with this person, then I could be happy. Or if only this person sitting next to me wasn't breathing so loudly, then I could be at peace and then I could meditate. And your mind goes crazy, but it's already crazy. And so the retreat, in some ways, is there to shine a light on how your mind is out of control. And then it gives you the tools to start to work with the mind. And this is, through neuroplasticity, we know that we can actually train the mind and cultivate different habits and behaviors. So these retreats, are an opportunity to say, okay, let me cultivate patience. Let me cultivate gratitude. Let me cultivate compassion for the person sitting next to me who's suffering, you know? And so these
Mm.
retreats became just incredibly important for me in my life. And I started going on a retreat a little more than once a year. So like once every 7 or 8 months, I would go on another silent retreat. And I did that for the past 15 years, really. I've been going on these retreats on a regular basis. And so that, year thing that you mentioned, I've spent quite a long time in silent retreat if you add up all the days.
Yep.
In
Yep.
terms of the monastic experience, it was more that I had decided to go on a month-long silent retreat in Myanmar. And on this month-long silent retreat, I had the opportunity to ordain as a monk for the duration of the retreat.
Mm.
And in kind of Southeast Asia, in kind of the Buddhism from those parts, temporary ordinations are actually very common. In many ways, it's seen as like a rite of passage for young men to do a temporary ordination. So you're not ordaining as a monk for the rest of your life. You're ordaining for a month or 2 months and having that experience, and kind of making that merit, but you're not saying, okay, I'm going to be a monk for the rest of my life. So this is a common misconception. I am not currently a monk, for anyone out there who's listening. I am a lay person, as we say.
Jeremy, I'm so disappointed. I'm just kidding. No,
Yeah.
and it actually shows, I said this in our first conversation together where I was like, you probably get this a lot, but you have the tone and kind of the approach, the presence of someone who's done a lot of meditation and practiced a lot of mindfulness. And so yeah, that training shows. Um, so I wanted to ask, just kind of about this mission that you're on at this point, having gone from science to teaching mindfulness to then creating the Unhooked Academy, right? And now all the men all over the world you're helping with pornography addiction. What makes your approach to recovery distinct? Do you feel like and really helps people the most?
Yeah. There are things that are coming to my mind about what I could say, make it distinct, and I'm also fully aware that there's many other wonderful people in this recovery world that are doing some of these things as well. And so I don't want to say, oh, mine is the only program, that does this, and we have this special technology. It's not that way. I would say though, some of the things that make my program somewhat unique. One is that focus on mindfulness and meditation, and really focusing on the mind and cultivating the mind through meditation. Um, so that's one thing. Another is kind of the secular approach. That I personally, I'm not religious, and I think there are a lot of men out there who in my community, there are people who are religious and non-religious, but it's nice to maybe have an approach to recovery that isn't necessarily faith-based, that is more based in kind of secular mindfulness practices, or so that's another big component of my approach, is that it's not faith-based, it's secular. And related to that, and probably most importantly, is that it's a shame-free, non-judgmental space. You know, there's no shame around not being perfect and having watched porn. It doesn't make you a sinner. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's a habit that you developed, in part because there's a big porn industry out there trying to hijack your attention, and you got hooked on it. and, you're not a bad person. And so that shame-free approach, I think, is something that's really important in the work that I do, and for a lot of the guys who come to my communities. They feel like it's a safe space. They feel like they're not being judged. They feel like they can show up as they are, even if they're not having a perfect week. And if they say, "Oh, I had a slip this week," that's okay. You're not shamed or shunned or said, you're living in sin. It's just, oh, okay, hey, you made a poor choice, an unskillful decision. We do that all the time as humans. Let's encourage each other and support each other and hold each other accountable to make better decisions. So for me, that shame-free approach is really important um, in my recovery personally, as well as the guys who come to my community.
Well, Jeremy, I thought that shaming and shunning were like the 2 best tools for recovery. I'm so surprised
Yeah.
by this.
Yeah.
Speaking
I
of
mean, and
yeah,
it's like there's so many, like, I know you as well. It's like you don't, you're not using shame out there. Yeah, I mean, that being said, actually, I'll just say a little side note. Probably one
yeah.
of the things that I do believe that is a little bit countercultural in terms of kind of the liberal background I have is that I actually do think there's healthy shame. I think there's pro-social shame, and there's a space for actually um, celebrating shame and remorse when it's done in a healthy way. Because it's funny, in Buddhist philosophy, shame is known as one of the two guardians of the world. It's actually seen as this really protective force that says, hey, this thing you did was unskillful. And the ickiness that you feel around that is actually a protector. It's what protects you from causing harm again in the future. And so actually we need to celebrate that kind of shame, the kind of shame that feels bad for when we've done something unskillful and says, oof, I feel icky because I caused harm to someone, or I caused harm to myself, or I lied. I don't want to do that again. So that's the beautiful side of shame, if you will.
I think it's fantastic. And I think, you know, and this is one of the things that we're going to really focus on now that I want to shift to. So it's good that you mentioned it. Um, Shame. I think that it can be a massive buzzword these days, especially, it's toxic. We shouldn't feel it. Just get rid of shame.
Mm.
Don't um, give it air to breathe at all. Right. I have found that that approach does not work. It's the opposite of helpful. I wondered if when it comes to shame though, right, it is one of the greatest drivers of addiction. So let's briefly talk about
Mhm.
that kind of in your view of why does shame play such a powerful role? And I talk about it consistently on the podcast, but for those who maybe haven't heard it before or aren't familiar, um, why does it play such a powerful role in addiction? How is it connected to something like pornography addiction?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, because it almost feels like this paradox. Like, okay,
Mhm.
shame is one of the things that keeps us locked in addiction, and but also it's like if we let go of shame completely. So where's the balance? And for me, it's important to start with definitions and really understand what we're talking about. And this is where I like to just delineate between what I call toxic shame versus healthy shame.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because if you don't understand the difference there, it's going to be very hard to talk about the nuances. Some people like to say, "Oh, well, there is no such thing as healthy shame. What it is guilt." And okay, it's semantics. Like if you want to call it guilt, fine. For me, guilt doesn't quite feel right. Shame actually is the thing that we're talking about. It's this feeling of I'm ashamed of my behavior, and that can be healthy. So the thing that differentiates healthy shame versus toxic shame is this feeling that, yeah, I've done some bad thing and I'm ashamed of it. And therefore, I am fundamentally broken. There is something wrong with me as a person. That's when it starts to lean into that toxic type of shame. Healthy shame is this action I did was unskillful. I'm ashamed of that action. And I know that I'm worthy of love and worthy of respect. Fundamentally, that it's not who I am, and this was just an unskillful decision that I wish I hadn't done. And so, it's kind of like the fundamental layer that's important there is the toxic shame says you're a bad person. You're not worthy of love. If people knew who you really were, they would kick you out of the tribe and shun you. That's toxic shame. Healthy shame is I know I'm a good person and this thing was not in alignment with my values, my integrity, my character, but it still was an unskillful action and I'm ashamed of that. That's kind of healthy shame. The reason that this is so important, getting back to your question of why does shame keep us stuck in addiction? And so why does toxic shame keep us stuck in addiction is that when you allow toxic shame to be at the forefront of your mind, when you allow this feeling of I'm broken and if people knew the truth about me, they would hate me or kick me out of the tribe or call the police or whatever it is. It prevents you from seeking help. It makes you want to isolate and run away and be by yourself and have nobody see who you actually are. And that's what exacerbates addiction. It's the isolation, it's the feeling of I can't be seen as I am. I can't be vulnerable because if I'm vulnerable, then people will know the truth about me. And so that's what exacerbates addiction is this isolation, the running away and feeling like you can't be who you are. The flip side of that, as we talked about earlier, is when you're in a safe space and you know that you can be vulnerable and talk about the things you're ashamed of, that's what heals addiction. So many times like the community I run, I'm sure the community you run as well. It's like when you see these guys coming together in community and being in a safe space where they can talk about something that they're so ashamed of for the first time in their life, is this huge weight off their shoulders. I mean, it's such a healing, liberating thing to be able to be in a group of men and to feel safe enough to say, I'm struggling with this. And I acted out yesterday and I'm not proud of it. And you just get looks of compassion around the room. I mean, that is the most liberating thing.
And it really takes me back to vulnerability, which is a requirement for connection, for true empathy and human connection. And vulnerous, I think it's vulnerous is the root word of vulnerability, means wound, right? So, in other words, to be vulnerable, to connect, I need to be woundable. And too many of us have had experiences in life where we do bring forward a painful emotion that's difficult, and it's met either with judgment or someone seeking to fix it, control it. Oh, you don't need to feel that, or you should feel more like this, or why don't you do this about it? Or I will say on the flip side, people enabling it or really indulging in it of like, oh yeah, you should feel that way. It's so bad and blah, blah, blah. And um, when really, if we can just be met with the openness, like you're talking about with mindfulness of just, hey, tell me about, tell me about that. Tell me about what you're going through, whatever the emotion is. Hey, I felt that way too. I get that. And let's talk about it. I'm here to listen. That then it leads to it leads to healing, it leads to connection, right? And that's it's very, very powerful. Um, and so, one of the things that I think of with this, Jeremy, is I wonder what your opinion is on this. I think a place that we really go wrong in Western, maybe particularly Western psychology, culture, is this idea that there are negative and positive emotions,
Mm,
bad and good emotions,
mhm, mhm,
where I teach my clients there are painful and joyful emotions, pleasant and unpleasant emotions, and welcoming them all in to listen and to feel with these parts of us that carry these emotions, to be with the mind. Um, I found that to be very powerful for myself, very powerful for clients, especially for something like shame, right? Do you think is one of the things that gives shame so much power is how we are not taught, nor do we practice really being present with it for a while and giving it space to be there and for us to be able to understand what's behind this for me and being with it. Would you say that that is one of the core differences between it driving addiction versus helping us being pro social or a healthy kind of shame?
Yeah, well, I think you kind of nailed it when you made that distinction between okay, bad versus good emotions versus pleasant and unpleasant emotions. I think it's not just shame; it's all of these unpleasant emotions that people don't know how to be with that drive addiction. It's not just shame. I mean, shame is one of the biggest because it's so painful, and again, it causes us to isolate. But all of these quote unquote, unpleasant emotions that people just think, oh, this is bad. I need to get rid of it. I need to not feel this way. Loneliness, as an example. People think, oh, I don't like this. This is unpleasant. Let me numb out. Let me get some artificial dopamine to make this loneliness go away. Boredom is another one. It's like boredom is an unpleasant emotion. People don't know how to be with it. And so they run away from it. So all of these unpleasant emotions that people don't know how to be with, as you say, if you can just let it pass through you, if you can welcome it in and be with it, it loses its power of being a driving force of addiction. And what's interesting is it's not just the pleasant and unpleasant. It's not just the unpleasant ones that people run away from. It's also the pleasant emotions that people don't know how to be with without grasping after it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, ooh, this feels pleasurable. Ooh, I need to have more of this. I need 3 cookies instead of 2. Ooh, that picture I saw on the screen feels good. Ooh, I need to go search for some more pictures on the screen. And so it's both the pleasant emotion that people don't know how to be with without grasping after it, and it's the unpleasant emotion that people don't know how to be with without pushing it away. And this is the fundamentals of what Buddhist philosophy is about, is understanding that push and pull from pleasant and unpleasant sensations. And that the liberation from that kind of hamster wheel of always running after what's pleasant or running away from what's unpleasant is through the practice of what we call equanimity. So equanimity is a really big component of the meditation training that we do in my program, but it's what equanimity is. It's not a common word we use a lot in Western society. Equanimity is this quality of mind that is non-reactive to what's happening, that is able to be with something unpleasant without running away, and that is able to be with something pleasant without feeling you need to grasp after it. So it's this grounded, centered, stable quality of mind that is able to be with what's happening. And that's a very important quality to have because otherwise we're just on this incessant running and chasing away, or kind of running away from what's unpleasant and chasing what's pleasant.
Mhm.
So, that's one other thing to say, this like dichotomy of good emotions versus bad emotions. And it is important to just say, okay, let me learn how to welcome all of these emotions and make space for it. That being said, there is a kind of a place to distinguish between, in Buddhist terms, we often talk about skillful versus unskillful emotions or actions. And particularly around actions, it's like an emotion is an emotion. It's arising, it's already there. There's no point in saying this is good or bad. It's just, it is what it is. If sadness is there, sadness is there. The question is it skillful or unskillful to act on it? That's
Mm.
the real question we should be asking ourselves, is what is the skillful response? Because if you take it too far to say, oh, every emotion is fine and just welcome in everything, or lust, yeah, just go for it. It's not necessarily skillful to act on that. And so the real question that we want to start asking ourselves is, what's an appropriate response? What's a skillful action? If I act on this desire, is that skillful or not? That's a much better distinguishing feature than is good versus bad.
Mhm. I actually had an experience recently that related to my own recovery that was um, pretty pretty profound for me. You mentioned loneliness, and I just want to share this briefly. So My wife and I had our second child recently. We were talking about that previous episode. Very exciting, beautiful, also chaotic, having another child and navigating the newness of all of that and taking care of a new human in the world that you're responsible for it. It's like, how am I qualified to do this? Don't know. But I did it once. We have one alive, so we're gonna. I think we'll keep this one alive too. So anyway, we were at the hospital, right? And there was one night where my wife was kind enough to say, "Hey, you really need sleep. Why don't you go home for the evening?" Because it wasn't far away. So I went home, went to, and I was in bed, and I had these very intense cravings for masturbation, and that's, I've been sober from porn for 10 years now, which is a huge blessing. And masturbation hasn't been that long for me. It's been a couple of years. And so for me, that was what I always kind of went to when I was younger. It's been over 20 years ago now when it started as this comfort mechanism for me, right? And so when I get in stressful situations, that's one of the things that my mind will go to, right? Masturbation is what's going to take care of your problems, right? Help you feel better, get you comfort and escape. And so I'm at home, I'm feeling this, and I've been practicing this, especially the last year and a half, of just being deeply present. And for me, it's through a parts work or an IFS perspective. I utilize those concepts every day. Um, and so, in feeling this craving, being deeply present with that feeling and that part of me that's feeding that to me of, okay, here this is, right? A part of me, a part of my mind trying to bring me comfort, right? It's trying to bring me comfort. And not labeling that part of me as bad. I've been practicing and learned to just see it as, again, a part of me trying to help, trying to bring comfort. I don't have to do what it says, right? But I can be present with it, appreciate it for how it's trying to show up, and then asking what was below it, right? And also getting present with the part of me that wants to judge it and be, oh, this has got to go away. I can't feel this. Make this part of me go away that wants mastery. It's going to ruin my whole life, right? Okay. I understand that part too. That's trying to hold me to morals and standards and values and all that. And that's a good part of me too, right? And so then seeing underneath, I asked, okay, what is this kind of a protective mechanism for me? And the very distinct answer came loneliness. Well, I was feeling lonely. It had been multiple days in the hospital. We're away from our normal routines. My baby's in the NICU, so I'm back and forth from the NICU and visiting my wife in her room. And so, and I'm not working. I'm not meeting with clients. I didn't realize till that moment how much I've come to just rely on the connection that I experience with clients every day and how meaningful that is. And so I'm feeling lonely, and I'm like, all right, so I'm feeling that and thinking, yeah, well, not working and kind of all those things I said, and this is what I'm feeling, and really embracing that part of me. And this reminds me actually, Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm very, a huge admirer of his work and his book, The Heart of the Buddhist Teachings. He talks about that embracing our feelings, kind of giving them a hug type thing. And so I embraced this part of me that felt the loneliness. Said, Come on, man. Come here. It's okay. It's all right to feel lonely. That makes sense that you'd feel lonely right now." And I really just embraced all that intensity and all that feeling of loneliness and everything that was underneath the craving, and just held that part of me, right? That was not something I was capable of at all, a couple of years ago, you know? It was very much the fighting and the driving and the straining and the trying to make it go away. How do I distract myself? And it just feeds the problem, right? Um, yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that as far as how that relates to what you do or anything else, but
Yeah, I mean, totally. First of all, I just think it's so beautiful the way you were able to describe. that because that is such a core component of real recovery is the compassion, the acceptance, the welcoming your emotions with open arms and parts work is amazing. Internal family systems, like learning how to say, yeah, there's a part of me that's lonely or hurt, and I want to welcome it and say, hey, I see you. You're okay. I'm here for you. I think you just nailed it so beautifully, as a great description for any guys out there listening, that this work of recovery is not about beating up those parts of yourself or cutting those parts of yourself off or suppressing, those feelings and emotions and saying, oh, this lust is bad and I've got to get rid of it and push it down, because that just doesn't work. And what really
Mhm,
works is, as you say, is like turning towards it and saying, oh, this is a part of me that just feels lonely. This is a part of me that feels afraid or whatever it is. And I, I can give it comfort. I can treat it as I would treat, a hurt young child who's coming to me in pain. And so that is such an important component of real recovery, is learning to make peace with all the parts of yourselves rather
yeah,
than to, it's like the goal that I'm sure you have and that I have for all of the clients we work with is that they live a life of inner peace where they get to stop this constant fight against themselves. Like, you and I wouldn't say, yeah, my goal for you is, 10 years from now, you haven't watched porn, but you're in a constant battle every day of fighting against yourself and just brute force. No, I'm not going to act out. It's like, that's not the goal that we have, for ourselves or for anyone we're working with. It's
mhm,
to end the struggle and to find peace within yourself. Like real, oh, I'm okay. And yeah, these emotions I'm having, I understand why I'm having them, and there's nothing wrong with me. And I know that, yeah, maybe watching porn right now isn't skillful, so I'm not going to do it, but I understand the reason behind that feeling or that desire. And I have compassion for myself. Like, that's that's the goal.
yeah, and I love it, Jeremy, and for you, what do you find, you know, in talking about that loneliness piece that I was feeling, getting in touch with the core need that I had, the core good desire, which was I want to be connected with people. I want to feel loved and love others. Like I really want to feel that human connection and relationship. And right now there's a part of me that's feeling like I don't have that. For you, what do you see are these deeper needs that men are trying to fulfill through pornography?
Yeah. Well, first, I guess one thing I'd like to say on this question of the deeper needs and why it's important. Are you familiar with the rat park experiment?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'll just explain it briefly for anyone listening who isn't familiar with it. They researchers were studying addiction, back in the 80s and 70s, 80s, particularly as soldiers were coming back from war. So they were studying the effect of morphine addiction in rats. And so they would give these rats in cages, they would give them water laced with morphine, and they found out that the rats were so addicted, they would sit there and drink the water basically until they died. They were just so addicted to the morphine water. And so it highlighted how strong addiction can be. But then this one researcher had this really interesting insight. He said, well, these rats are living in these miserable cages. It's not a natural condition. What if we gave them a more natural rat like environment? Gave them greenery and plants and other rats to play with and exercise wheels. What if we gave them that and then looked at the effects of addiction? So they first got the rats addicted to the morphine water, and then they put them in these natural environments, what they call the rat parks, where they had rats to play with and exercise and all this stuff. And they found out that the rats barely touched the water, the morphine water after that. That when they were living in a deeply fulfilling environment, when they had other rats to play with and socialize with, and they had exercise and all of that stuff, there was nothing for addiction to latch onto. And so it just highlights how important it is for us to not just look at the behavior or the substance and demonize it and say, oh, it's all about that substance. It's really about, are we living a deeply fulfilling life? Are we having our needs met? Because if we're not getting our deepest needs met, we are going to get addicted to whatever it is that's there, whether it's porn or gambling or junk food or alcohol. And so we've got, to address the deeper needs of our life and live a more fulfilling life if we want to beat addiction on all fronts, from the inside. So
Mhm.
to me, that story of the rat park just really highlights why it's important to focus on these deeper needs in life. And, as you mentioned, social connection and all these other things. So for a lot of guys these days, social connection is a big one. Not getting their body kind of moving enough, not getting enough exercise or sunlight or physical activity, is another thing that really causes that. Not having enough joy in life. There are a lot of guys out there who maybe have the social connection, they go to the gym, but they don't have any joy or playfulness in their life.
Mhm.
And that's a big one too, is like finding ways to enjoy your life is important. To play sports and have fun and be playful. So there's a lot of different needs that are not being met. And for each guy, it's going to be different, which again is not to beat the drum too much, but mindfulness, it's, it's like, it's so important is mindfulness can be that tool of self-awareness that lets you see what it is that you're needing. As you used it so beautifully, it's like, oh, I'm lonely. I'm aware that I'm not getting the connection I need.
Yep. Because it requires, as you say, it's a skill. It's something to be practiced. This new neural wiring we have to build because, um, I mean, I know for me how completely out of tune I was with my own emotions. I mean, I spent a lifetime angry. I was always angry, just a kind of a simmering anger always under the surface. And if someone would have asked me, "How are you feeling right now?" "I'm good." You know, I I had no clue that I was always angry. And for me, I'm a Christian, right? And so I was actually praying several. This is a number of years ago, 8 years ago or so, and I was like, God, I want to be a better man. What do I need to focus on? And I got this very distinct impression, which was, you got to give up your anger.
Mhm.
And I remember just being like, my anger? What are you talking about? What anger are you referring to?
I'm
And
not angry.
I'm never angry, right? And I remember how then in the following weeks I just became very, very aware of, I'm always angry, just always.
Mm, mm,
And so the anger that I felt, and then the perfectionism that I had all the time, this underlying just frequency consistently there, which you mentioned it before, of shame. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not matching up. I need to be better. I should be doing better. Why am I not doing this? Why am I not doing that? And I still deal with, shame and perfectionism, as we all deal with shame, right? But being deeply mindful of it and being aware of it, there's that part of me that feels it's not good enough and is feeding me these messages, and understanding why. And I have parts of me that have very high standards and want to live according to a very high moral code. So that's good. It's not bad that I want those things, or that those parts of me want those things. And feeling an acceptance and an appreciation, compassion for those parts of me. And one of the things that you mentioned, Jeremy, you were talking about. Actually, I don't remember exactly what you said, but it made me think of the realm of hungry ghosts. And I know we talked about this in our previous conversation, so I wanted to bring that up. There are many people who may not be aware of it, what that is, or what that analogy, that metaphor is. Why don't you describe that for a bit, and we'll just talk about how that relates to addiction?
Yeah, I love this topic. The realm of the hungry ghost is a topic that just it's so succinctly captures, what addiction is all about and just that feeling of it. So for people who aren't familiar with what that is, in Buddhist philosophy, there are these different realms of existence. And we know now that they're not real realms. They're not like real places you can go. They're more manifestations of the mind. So they're different kind of mental qualities we can inhabit. But there are these different realms, and so one realm is like the heavenly realm where everything is just blissful and happy and joyful, and everything is pleasant all the time. That's the heavenly realm. Then there's the hell realm where everything is just unpleasant. It's torture and pain and suffering and darkness. There's the human realm that we live in, which kind of has a mix of all these things. And then there's the animal realm, which is, very primal instincts and animals, just doing animal things. And then there's this one realm called the realm of the hungry ghosts. And it's this realm of these ghost like creatures that wander around, and they have these massive bellies, these huge stomachs, massive stomachs, and tiny pinhole mouths. So their mouths are so small that they wander this existence and they can never eat enough to satisfy their massive hunger. And so their whole existence is just wandering around this realm, constantly feeling hungry and never able to satisfy their hunger. And I just feel like that it so much captures what addiction feels like. It's just wandering around, always feeling hungry for more and never able to satisfy your hunger. And that, when I was in the midst of my addiction to porn, I remember it so clearly, so vividly, that feeling of never being able to satisfy my hunger. Like it was insatiable. No matter how much porn I watched, I always wanted more. No matter how much sex I had, I always wanted more. No matter how much success or validation, it was never good enough. Nothing was ever good enough, and I always needed more. And so that realm of the hungry ghost is just a great analogy for, what the mind and life of addiction feels like.
And do you see all those as intertwined, Jeremy, as kind of an overarching mindset of addiction, whether it be I'm never enough success, never enough money, never enough, never a good enough husband, never a good enough this, that, and then never enough porn. Are those all of the same frequency or what have you, or how do you
Yeah,
see it?
totally. Yeah, they're all, I mean, the same neural pathways, are associated with all of them. Just this feeling of, oh, I need more. I need more. I'm not satisfied. This isn't good enough. Whether it gets directed towards, you know, this porn isn't enough and I need more videos and, whatever, or,
Mhm,
oh, this,
mhm.
I'm not good enough and I need to be more and I'm not satisfied, or my partner isn't good enough and she needs to look better. And all that, it's the same flavor of the mind of, I need something else to be happy. That's that craving that we talked about earlier, this feeling of,
Mhm.
I need something else. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it really all is intertwined. It's not just, people think, a lot of people, they think, oh, it's just porn. If I can just stop watching porn, all my problems will be fixed. And, what I like to say is like, sobriety is not the same as recovery. Just stopping some behavior doesn't really fix any of your problems. It helps. It is helpful to
Sure.
stop watching porn, because it's like, if you keep pouring poison on a plant, it's very hard for that plant to grow, even if you give it proper sunlight and water and nutrients in the soil. So we do have to stop pouring the poison on us. But we also need to give ourselves sunlight, nutrients, water, all these things that allow us to grow. And that's the work of recovery, which is beyond just stopping watching porn.
It's one of the things that, I've talked with clients about multiple times. It comes up where it's like, well, when I quit porn, then I can start this side hustle I want to do. Or when I quit porn, then I can finally be the kind of husband that I want to be. Or when I quit porn, then I'll um finally feel good enough. And that, look, again, like you say, pouring poison on that plant, it's, yeah, it that will help to get rid of the poison. But I say, you have it flipped. You have to start pursuing those things of being the husband that you want to be, or pursuing the side hustle that you're passionate for, or, you know, trying to cultivate a belief of I am good enough because I'm doing things that are meaningful or things that I enjoy. Those Cultivating those are going to take they're going to replace the addiction. Yeah.
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 What I see, in the clients that I've worked with is the ones who are most successful at overcoming porn are the ones who porn isn't even really a focus of the work that we're doing. Like we're not even talking about it that much. Instead, we're talking about, oh, I'm pursuing this new passion and I'm having this conversation with my wife that we've never had before, and I'm really working on my career, and oh, I'm getting to the gym. The guys who are most successful, porn is like an afterthought. It's almost like, oh, I haven't even thought about porn in a while because I'm focused on all these other aspects of improving my life.
Mhm. Yeah. So it can feel so counterintuitive because we get so fixated on this one thing, this very narrow perspective of if I can just get rid of this, then everything will be solved. And I think I realized that during my recovery where when I did finally get sober from porn, my mind just moved on to some other reason that I wasn't good enough, right? And then I got rid of
Hmm.
that thing or overcame that thing, and then it was another thing, and I started to realize, okay, this is not actually about what I thought it was about, you know? It's about something much deeper. Um, and I wondered, from your perspective, you know, how does shame, again, going back to kind of our core topic here, how does shame fuel the hungry ghost cycle, this kind of cycle we get in? How does awareness begin to break that loop that we get into?
Mm, yeah, it's a great question. I mean, all of these things are intertwined, but sometimes they're very subtle, the connections. But again, just going back to understanding how shame impacts our behavior. Shame is that feeling that I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. Again, toxic shame. We'll just call it toxic shame, or
Mm,
call it shame, but
mm,
know that we're talking about the toxic shame. It's that feeling that I'm not good enough the way I am. If people knew the truth about me, they would shun me, or something's wrong with me. And when we have this fundamental belief, something is wrong with me, we feel that we need to fill that void or cover up that insecurity with things outside of ourselves. Oh, I need to get this validation from someone outside of me in order to feel okay. I need to wear this certain kind of watch and make sure people see it in order to feel like I'm worthy of respect. And so we start putting our sense of self worth outside of ourselves. And that's what leads to the hungry ghost syndrome. I was thinking, these hungry ghost creatures, they wander around constantly looking for things outside of themselves, thinking, I need something else to fill that void inside of me, as opposed to
mm,
realizing, hey, I mean, it's kind of poetic. If these ghosts could realize that they have everything they need, they don't need to fill their massive stomach. There is no void. It doesn't matter how small your pinhole mouth is because you don't actually need to put stuff in it. Like you're already full and whole and you don't need those external things. And that's, part of where we hope to get to in recovery is feeling that sense of genuine self-worth and self-respect and self-love.
I can't think of a better note to kinda end on, Jeremy. Is there anything else, though, that you wanted to discuss that we haven't talked about in the episode today?
Not really. I think the questions you asked and the things we hit on today are is really so much like the foundation of recovery. It's all the right stuff of letting go of shame, welcoming your emotions, living a fulfilling life. Like I feel like that's a mic drop moment. This, just like that's what you got to do.
Yeah,
And get connected. Connect with other people.
yeah,
We talked a little bit about like being around other guys and getting support and being held accountable. We didn't really talk too much about accountability, but accountability is so valuable. Like letting other guys in on what you're doing and just knowing that you're going to check in with other guys. That alone does wonders for your recovery. And it's the thing. A lot of times people ask me, what's the first step somebody can do if they feel like they're addicted? Is I say get connected. You know, let yourself be held accountable by other guys because that alone, so many of the guys in my program, they say, yeah, just knowing that we're going to have this weekly check in, there was a time where I was tempted to act out, but I knew we were going to have a weekly check-in, so I decided not to. And that can be really powerful because when you're trying to do it alone, it's just too easy to say, "Ah, nobody's going to know. What's the big deal if I act out? I'll just start again on Monday." So doing it alone is just so challenging. And when you can get connected, it puts your recovery on, gives rocket fuel to your recovery.
Love it. Speaking of getting connected, how can people connect with you if they want to work with you, or where should they go if they want to, yeah, if they want to work with you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I would say, that, first, if you're interested in kind of hearing more about the work I do, just check out my podcast, Unhooked. That's probably the best place to learn about kind of the work I do. And then if you want to learn more about the community I run or working with me, just go to unhookedacademy.com and it's got all the information there.
Awesome. Love it. Love it, man. Well, such a privilege to have you on, Jeremy. A lot of just amazing quality that you're offering and beautiful insights. I think it's helped a lot of men today. So thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.